quiet moments before the world wakes up, there's a place where pain meets peace, where every breath feels like a prayer and grief stands still. We carry the weight of what was and search for meaning in the smallest things. And sometimes all it takes is one moment to remind us we're still here, still healing.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. You guys know who it is. This is Tony Lynch. I am the host of this podcast, and yes, we are your number one podcast and bringing you stories around death, down to grief, all the messiness that comes in between with some amazing people out here changing people's lives one heartbeat at a time. Now, I would like to say, if this is your first time tuning in, do me a favor, head on over to the YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time that we drop a new episode. And most importantly, this is a live stream. So if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the comment section. We'll be sure to answer them as we go. One other thing before I bring on my guests, I would like to say that this is for educational purposes only. All right, so we'll see you here. I'm going to bring on my next guest. So guys, help me welcome Sam to the show. Sam, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing well. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yeah. So before we get started, introduce yourself to the audience. Tell people who you are, where you're from, and about the work that you do.
Of course. So I'm Sam Halliwell. I am based in England, and I work with women all over the world with helping them with endometriosis and other similar issues that are disease held in that kind of area of the body. And in doing so, it's in a big variety of ways, everything from the more practical side of things, and especially, and we'll be talking about today, with where things are stored in the body. So emotions and feelings and trauma and things like that getting stored in the body, and the difference that can make to all sorts of conditions and disease in a variety of ways.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, I want to say thank you for the work that you do. It's really important, especially the educational part, to help people understand how we carry this stuff in the body, because you and I both know we've seen people go to the doctors hundreds of times and get misdiagnosed and things like that. And it comes down to that one simple thing, working on the things that you're carrying, like your grief, your trauma, all of those mental health situations that you may put yourself in, working on those things. So let's dive deeper into that. What are some of the common things that you see with people that have not worked through those issues?
So especially in the people I see, it shows up initially as pain. That tends to be where they first arrive to see me, and fertility issues is quite common as well. But quite early on, pretty much almost immediately working together, we can see what lies underneath, that it's way more than that. That's just the presentation. That's just the surface level that's showing up in the immediacy. Underneath, the three most common things that I see are shame, grief, and resentment. And all three of them have an underpinning of fear, usually fear of being able to feel those things in a safe space and not feeling safe to do so. And fear of going back there, fear of feeling those things again. And so they push down those feelings, literally going into a no, I'm not listening, part to their own body and those feelings, because those feelings are scary and not feel unpleasant to feel in the way that they've been taught and allowed to feel. And so they'll push down, and actually they're actually right just under the surface, and it doesn't take much to hit into them.
Yeah. Now let's talk some of the diseases that may come up when they push all of these things down. Like, I've seen people struggle with diabetes, heart problems, lung problems, insomnia, things like that, right? And when we say that we carry these things in the organs because they're being suppressed down, what are some of the ways that we can help individuals understand that and be able to move that stuff throughout the body so they can become healthier?
Yeah, great question, because it's something that just isn't talked about day to day, especially in the modern medicine system. You're given a tablet and that's it's this, or sorry, can't help you. And actually, one of the first things that I work with is that reconnection with the body, because any of these conditions, disease is a root in the words dis-ease. It is the body out of ease, and everything then comes back to the nervous system. Our nervous system is such a key, crucial part of our bodies, and is so massively underlooked and in lots of places understudied, and yet controls almost everything. And when we're in dis-ease in any kind of way, 99 times out of 100, there's something in the nervous system regulation that is out of kilter. And that's where the emotions then come into play, because the emotions, especially when we're not wanting to feel them and trying to push them down or push them away, this causes a nervous system response. And our nervous system is great. It's designed to give us that fight flight. When something actually crucial is happening right now, it is our body's way of saying, get out of there or deal with
Right.
it. It's an important function. And in modern times, it is so out of whack, and so many people are walking around with a nervous system that is on 24/7. And it is so debilitating and so damaging to us across a whole range of conditions and diseases have this root in the nervous system, because when we look at the where the nervous system is good and is helping us in those immediate situations, its job is to take all of the blood, all of the energy away from our secondary organs and everything into fight or flight. Literally, that's its job. It's to make sure we've got the muscles, our muscles tense up so they're nice and strong, our legs tense up so we can run away. All of these things, the blood and energy goes there and goes away from the other parts of our body. The parts of our body that have the relax, regenerate. All of the parts of us that allow us to sleep well, allow us to digest properly, allow us to reproduce, allow us to rejuvenate and repair our cells. All of those parts of us get less because our body's going, need to run away, which is fine if it's in the moment, but actually when that's 24/7, that's where these dis-eases come, because our standard place, our homeostasis, just isn't there anymore. Our new place of norm becomes high adrenaline, high cortisol, gotta keep running, and our body, we're just not designed that way. And so we panic, we get fearful. That's why I say a lot of these things underpinned with fear. We push away. No, I don't want to feel this. No, I'll just carry on. No, I'll be fine. I'll just ignore it. And our minds, we convince ourselves that we've ignored it and pushed it away, but our bodies just don't ignore these things, and they store all of that somewhere in our bodies. And that's where so many diseases that don't seem to be related to each other can be, because the core is this dysregulated nervous system. And so a lot of what I do is that, looking at the nervous system repair, how to reconnect with our bodies, listen to our bodies. Our bodies give us cues. Feelings are cues. They are telling us something, Anger is telling us that there's a boundary being crossed or about to be crossed. Fear is that something unpleasant is about to happen. Grief is that a recognition of somebody or something that means something to us, and the pain and the feeling of it changing. These are signals, and when we take them away, we actually stop being able to feel fully. And if we can't feel those symptoms, those feelings, we also can't feel the highs either, because we kind of end up flatlining a bit and have a body that feels like it betrays us. I remember that in the early days of my diagnosis with endo, hating my body and saying, things now that I'd never say, saying really horrible things about my body because it was, in my mind, betraying me. It was causing me issues, and actually now I see it in that different way, that wasn't the case. I just wasn't listening.
As you're saying that, I started thinking about a couple of things, including myself. Before I understood how all of this worked and things like that, I used to carry a lot of it, and it used to show up in anger or just being very shut down towards people. I mean, there's still times where I do shut down because there's times where it could just be too much, and sometimes people don't get it, right? But I'm okay with people not understanding it. It's just my way of being able to go into my space to be able to make sense out of everything. And like you said, recognizing the emotions as they're starting to surface and things like that, so I can become aware of them. But I can also learn to regulate them as well. I can begin to go, is this a necessary emotion? Right now, not saying that all emotions are necessary. I just think that sometimes with the nervous system, it can overthink things, right? And you have to be careful with misarticulating the emotions that you're feeling, right? Because that's part of it. You have to be honest with yourself.
Absolutely. And with trauma responses, that can be so hard to do. I mean, there's scientific studies that show they put people in an fMRI machine and had their trauma response triggered, and the fMRI showed that their brains responded to a scientific lab environment, but where the trauma was triggered, as though the trauma was happening in that exact moment. So traumatic memories are stored in a completely different way to general memories, because there's our emotion center gets fumbled, for want of a better word. That's not the scientific term, but roll with me. It gets fumbled, and it means, and also our time perception part of our brain gets also fumbled. So what happens is when we're recalling a traumatic event because it's been triggered, our brains and our bodies do not know the difference about that it happened X amount of time ago. Our brains and our bodies chemically and biologically think it's happening right now. And so it's very hard to have that separation, because it might be that the thing that's happening right now is something not particularly exciting, but has triggered you. A boss shouting at you, a situation in the street that you see something you don't like, a phone call from somebody from your past. Like the situation in the present might be not as significant, but because it triggers that old thing up, your body goes into and it hits that point and can't separate now to then. And being able to learn how to do that through working with people like us and how that connection reestablishes, you're able to then get that separation and go, that isn't happening now. And I need to work on the feelings about what did happen so that in the now I can respond to the now.
That makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. So let's go into your story a little bit. How did you get in here, get to this place where you are today, helping people understand the connection between the mind, the body, and the nervous system, and helping them heal? How did you get here?
Yeah, so sort of by accident, which I think is how the most beautiful things sometimes come about. So I was diagnosed with endometriosis quite young, and I spent in my early 20s and was convinced for a long time by doctors and just everything you read that I was kind of stuck with this thing. There was nothing else I could do. And that the disease and the physical issues I was having was like one bit. And I had no idea until the last, relatively recently, the last few years or so, that had a connection to something that was much older and much more psychological and emotional. So I had a challenging time growing up. I've had few traumatic and grief and shame and all sorts of experiences over my life. So when I was quite young, my parents went together from quite young, which back then was quite unusual. I grew up in dangerous environment. So my mum, who I lived with, was managed pubs. So our house was above them, and she tended to manage the more rough areas, let's say. So there was a lot of violence and challenges every single day right below me as I was, going to sleep as a young child, and knowing that my mum was within that environment that I could hear but not see. And that plays funny tricks on a young child. That does make you think all sorts of strange things, and definitely the fear part that came in, and the stories then that would come up when she'd come upstairs and she'd share some of the things that had happened. They sit with you, and this was when I was very, very young. I had a challenging relationship with my mum. We get on now, but there was a lot of challenges that we had together. We triggered each other, and we had patterns that were established quite young. She was very young when she had me, which again was quite unusual back then. Not so much now, but quite unusual back then. And our challenging relationship meant that there was quite a few moments between us that caused challenges and pain for myself. I ended up, because of that, moving out quite young. I was 13 when I moved out and went to live with my grandparents. By that time, though, a lot of the things that had written into my course, so to speak, meant that I was having terrible trouble at school as well. Like I was having just hideous time at school, hated every second of it. The only peace I had was between school and home. That bus, I always used to wish it could last 10 times longer. It was only about, I think it was about half-hour stop, I think. But I used to wish it could last days because it was the only respite. And I, grew up and had challenging relationships and all sorts of bits and bobs there. And then combining with the endometriosis side of things, I had huge trouble with fertility, which is not unusual for someone with these kind of conditions. I had to have a lot of help conceiving my first child. I was told all sorts of things about my body and about who I was as a woman. It's quite a challenging, which is often misunderstood, the way doctors present it. It's very defeminizing and can really make you just question what on earth you are and who you are. And as part of that fertility challenges that I had, lots and lots of operations, and I lost a child in between the two children that are with me still today. And I'd already at that point started looking into some of wanting to help people with this condition and various bits around it. But that changed everything, as you can imagine. I pretty much said to the universe, well, I don't want to be helping anybody with this bit. Like, I can't even cope myself. Like, I went into a complete dark spiral. And I kind of don't remember much of it because it felt like it was all a complete blur. There's a whole period of time where in my memory it kind of feels like it lasted a day but lasted years, and it really put me on a complete downward spiral. And looking back now, one thing I can see massively was the grief of that I didn't deal with. I didn't have the resources or the people around me to know how to deal with the emotions of that. And then with my youngest, I caught with her very quickly after that loss. It hadn't been 10 months before I then fell pregnant again. And in some ways that made the not dealing with it so much more compounded, because I couldn't, even if I had found some space and support to try and work through that, I couldn't, because here I was carrying another child, and I wanted and had plans to give my energy to that. what I, again, just didn't see the time, hindsight's a wonderful thing, right? Was after my youngest was born, I hit postnatal anxiety and depression like you wouldn't believe. Like, it hit me like a truck. And no wonder, looking back, it's like so obvious why that would have occurred. But at the time, I was like, what's this about? I really want this baby, da 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 da. And I became a complete recluse. I couldn't go out the house. I was so fearful of other people. And what didn't help timing-wise, universally, not long after she was born, so she was born in 2019, and then, of course, a year later we had COVID hit, where everybody had to stay inside and everybody had their fear senses go up even more. So my already hermit lifestyle became a little bit extreme. And I just completely shut off emotionally. I shut off from my own body. Like, I was completely cut off from the neck in terms of physical sensations and knowledge of who I was. I was what I refer to now, some of my colleagues refer to as head on stick. From the neck below, I may as well have been a robot because there was nothing I was connected to at all. And I had a really hard time with her, and had some help. I was able to, because I was under maternity care, I was able to reach out and have some help and support. But the support was at a level where it didn't look back at where it might have come from. And it was only then when I started being able to come out of that and re-looking back at some things that I had started prior, which was my own self-development. And again, I hadn't done any of this with the intention of around endometriosis or any of the disease itself, just about wanting to help myself, knowing that I'd had a variety of challenges growing up. I wanted to do differently, right? So I embarked on a series of self-development work, looking into how things were coming up in the present that were related to the past. I did counselling and coaching and all sorts of methodology to help that. And in amongst that, one of the two things that have massively turned things on its head, so to speak, and this is why then what I bring to people now. The first was embodiment work, the somatic work, the moving your body in a way that allows you to connect to where things are stored, how they're stored, without having to think. The brain can go and have a holiday for that embodiment exercise and that the routine, and you can just feel, just be with oneself, no judgment, no concerns, in a completely safe space that was massively supported. And I started to, disengage the robot part of me and start to recognize who I was and feel into who I was again. And in that, things came up, some of the emotions that I had completely pushed down and completely ignored, consciously and unconsciously, started coming to the surface. And because I was in that safe, supported space, I was able to work and deal through them and dig into what that meant. That was probably one of the first significant points of the way things changed for me. And the second was more recently. So it was on the back of the somatic work, that I decided I want to bring this to others and help them through it in the same way that I had. Throughout all this time as well, I'm a massive geek at heart, so I'd looked into how emotions affect the body and vice versa. Like when I think of something or I read something that's interesting or that helps, like I'm definitely a go down the rabbit hole kind of person when it comes to research. And there isn't much research still. I mean, it's getting better, but there's still not a lot. But what is out there, a lot of it talks about this, how things get stored in the body and how accessing them and processing them, if we're not able to process something the time it happened, being able to connect with it and process it at a later point can clear the energy of it. So this was all going on, and I was doing all this research and this interesting bit. And then I happened to more recently go on a journey as a coachee. So I was being coached by somebody else, and two people in fact. And the particular work they did was this deeper transformational work, this digging into what's showing up now, how it relates to something that isn't in the now at all. And working on a lot of the trauma release work, inner child healing, working with the ego instead of fighting against it. All of these type of psychological embodiment, holistic approaches to feel into and release what had happened before. And in doing that, then that's what I've added on to bring to my clients as well. And one of the biggest things is to with that reconnection is to feel back into something, you know. It's when we haven't felt something in its fullest, it will reoccur, and it'll pop up at times when we're not even expecting it to, and times we don't want it to, you know. I remember my counsellor saying when I first saw her, she called me someone who leaks, because I wasn't somebody who would just bawl their eyes out. I wasn't somebody in a session who would just crumble and and in some ways perhaps it would have been better if I had, because I'd been much more in touch with what was happening for me. But because even in sessions I would still be hiding and pushing away what was happening, I would just leak out of one eye. And so she always used to say, gosh, you know, let go into it. And I'm like, yeah, I'm feeling it all. And she's like, you're not, because all that's happening is just this one leak tear that just streams down. And it took a long time to be able to go from the one tear leak into now when something comes up because of the somatic work, the breath work, the embodiment, the inner child healing, all of these tools that I have and bring to others. If something comes up now, and it does, because you know, we're human. There is no version of perfect. Something will appear in our minds, in our bodies, in our environment. And the difference now is when it does, I'm like, right, okay, there's something happening here. My body's telling me something. Let's go and see what that's about. And I'm able to, if it is what's needed is to, you know, bawl my eyes out and have the complete emotional dig in and release, then I'll do that. And sometimes it, you know, may just be a rework and a breathing exercise to let it out, the whole variety of different solutions, because it's a whole different variety of problems that can come up, right? There's not one solution fits all. But doing that and being able to lean in and move and heal what's going on is so critical and so important, and just not done enough. It's not something that is offered widely enough and understood enough, which is, I think, one of the biggest shames, and one of the things wanting to talk to yourself and other people like this is to bring the awareness to it as well, because that's going to be really key for changing how this goes in the future, for future generations and for ours.
Which leads me to this question, because as you were talking about that, I totally agree with it. And there was something that I worked on as well, which was the shadow work, right? The underlying work, the really, really in-depth work of pushing everything to the surface. And the reason being is because I was always in survival mode my whole entire life, right? You know, it was never a flight or a freeze. Mine was always fight. Let's fight it out. Let's see what happens. Win, lose, or draw, no matter what, right? But then I can reflect on how the different versions of myself was able to adapt in survival mode to the different situations that I was in. And so that in turn, when I was doing the shadow work, I realized the depth of it. And it was, Sam, look, it was a lot of work getting down to the nitty.
Oh, yeah.
Like it wasn't just one thing when I was a kid. It was several things as a kid. But then curiosity and thinking about how the body, because I was always violent. I was always aggressive. I was always, I was never afraid to back down from anything. So,
Mm.
when I put two and two together, and I began to see the disconnect between the nervous system and my emotions, and which was the cause and effect of everything. Like, why do
Mm.
I act this way, right? And once I began to do that, I began to categorize all of these different things. And once I was able to do that, I was go, like, this isn't even mine. This isn't even mine. This is something that I need to deal with. Like, okay, this happened, but I wasn't a victim, etc. Right. So it was the rewiring of not only the synapses in my brain, but the rewiring of the nervous system within inside the body, so it
Mhm.
could begin to operate on the same level as
Mhm.
one. Right. No more disconnect and things like that, because I think what happens, and I could be totally wrong with this, people get so used to not feeling
Mhm.
that sometimes it becomes a very, very safe place for them to not feel, to just go, oh, well, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I say that term a whole lot too. I'm always like, it is what it is. But that's my way of saying I can accept what is happening and I'm just going to keep moving.
Mm. Yeah.
Right. Um, and I do realize that sometimes me doing that, um, I oftentimes have to go back and work on that right there, because the only thing I'm doing is just putting it into my box of things I have to work on. What are your thoughts about that, Sam?
Absolutely, completely agree with that. And it's a lot of what comes into play with that sort of thing. Then it is our ego, our ego self.
Mhm.
Our ego is a beautiful part of our psychology, and it doesn't always provide in the adult self the most useful situation, let's say. So one of the things you talked about there was that connection with that connection with the body and not wanting to feel things. And if we have a belief from when we're young, usually or a particular traumatic experience, but often things that when we were young and in our childhood, that told us we weren't safe for some reason, our ego will go, okay, we're not safe, so we'll make sure that we focus on safety because we don't think we're safe anywhere. And in the same way, if I was to say to you, whatever you do right now, Tony, don't think about a yellow car. Like, please don't think about a yellow car. You must not think about a yellow car right now. Anything else, but not a yellow car. There's only one thing you're thinking of, right? And that's a yellow car.
That's the yellow car.
It's the yellow. Even though all of my instructions were about don't do it, the only thing that can come to mind in that point is a yellow car. So in the same way, if a part of us that's actually very good at keeping us a version of regulated, and I say a version because it's a dysregulated self, but it's a self that it finds that is the homeostasis, the standard point. Our ego is trying to keep us at that standard point by focusing so much on fear that that's all it sees, that's all it's bringing in, and we're testing ourselves constantly. And testing ourselves when we get to a point of not wanting to feel stuff, we are proving to ourselves every day, in some cases, that we can't feel. We will be in situations and having responses where we go to feel something and we don't, and we push it away. And that constant testing of ourselves via this ego response is definitely trying to protect us, actually, just further and further keeps everything away. And I see this with some of my clients, as one of my clients recently, that when I got her to talk about feeling her body and recognizing what her body was telling her, she was like, I don't feel anything. I don't feel anything at all. And I challenged her on that, and I was like, okay, unless I remember wrong, you're not paralyzed from the neck down, right? You're not. You haven't got a physical condition that of that. And she's like, no. I'm like, okay, so if you walk into a table and you stub your toe, that hurts, right? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, so your body can feel stuff. And she looks at me like, well, yeah, but that's not what I meant. I'm like, yeah, I know, but it is. And it's just a different rewiring in our brain. As you say, it's just that different recognition of awareness. If we're able to feel our toe when we stub it on the kitchen table, we are able to feel into other things in our body and emotions. But we've just spent so long focusing on ignoring them that they have to scream so loud to get our attention, and that's where disease comes from. And so one of the first things when I hear someone who say, I just can't feel anything, like I just don't feel it at all, I get them just to start with every day, 10 minutes, all it takes every day, even 5, but 10 minutes is a nice amount, just to scan through the body and pay attention. It's like opening up the language barrier. So you scan through your body, and without judgment, without trying to figure out what it means, because if someone's I don't feel anything, they can't try and figure out what it means. That's way too much of a step. So I'm just like, okay, every morning spend 10 minutes going through your body one bit by bit, my head, my neck, my shoulder, my arm, and go through each part of your body and just notice. Is there a part that tingles? Is there a part that's hotter than the rest, colder than the rest? Anything, absolutely anything that's just a little bit different to the rest of you, or a little bit different to how it was yesterday. And make a note. Doesn't have to be interpreted, just make a note. Today my left little finger was tingly. Okay, make a note. Because what it does is it sets up that relationship with listening to our body that also helps we rewire the ego part of us as well, that, okay, she is starting to listen now. He is going to listen to us now. Right, if we send signals, they're not just going, la, 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 I'm not listening. It's listening now. Okay, great. And it will then start be that you can unlock other parts and reconnect too, because that understanding and listening, when we're in such a fear state, we fear we're not in a safe space. And that's so easy to be interpreted as safe space environmentally in other people, but we actually learn to not be a safe space within ourselves. We learn that our own self, our own brain is not safe because there's a part of us that's so judgmental or so challenging or catty or whatever, that means we're not safe with ourselves. And so again, just bringing that safety. Okay, I hear you. Yeah, I hear you, self, a part that talks to you. Okay, I hear you. That can be huge. And that's where some of that rewiring that you talked about as well can happen, because we're able to see something for what it was. We're able to bring out of the unconscious things as well, because when things are unconscious, we can't do anything about it. And we can also, in consciousness, start to separate emotionally through things like the embodiment work and the processing and things like that, but also just through awareness of how, and rewire a belief system to be the opposite. So a good example of this, one of my family mottos growing up, for want of a better word, was anger is one letter away from danger. So whereas for you, you'd mentioned that fight was your main response. For me, fight was not allowed. That was banned. So I had the complete opposite, where I completely froze. Anything that looked anything like a danger or an anger, my entire body would just completely freeze up, go into full-blown panic mode, full-blown fear mode. I'm not safe. And I'd have an internal complete freak out, really. Because in our family, anger's one letter away from danger, so we don't do that. And actually it meant that I'd completely shut off. And it was only in working with a coach that came up. And we then dug into the fact that by having that belief, I had so much anger inside of me, so much anger, because I'd repressed it so deeply for so long, because you're not allowed to do that. And I had to breathe into it. Now, it didn't mean that I turned into somebody who started, hitting things or hurting people or myself or anything like that, because there's the emotion and then there's what you do with it, and they can be the same or they can be different things. There's lots of different ways of expressing something. But I had to feel and go into feeling a huge amount of anger, more than I thought I could possibly imagine possible, to get to the other side where now a new belief is anger is appropriate. Anger is a way of my body is signaling me that there's a boundary being crossed, that there's something I need to pay attention to. And when it's righteous anger, I now will absolutely do that. And I'm also conscious of is it righteous? Is it responding to something in the now?
Right.
And therefore fine and right to feel it and express it in the right way for the right situation, because I am an adult and can choose how to express it. Or is it something that's plopped up from the past, one of those moments where when I was younger I suppressed it because it's not allowed, and in which case then I'm like, because I've got the consciousness awareness and the layers of the healing that I have done on that, I'm able to go, okay, this isn't about now. Right, okay, I'm going to pause this situation with whoever I'm feeling or thinking I'm being angry at, because I'm recognizing it's actually not about them or this situation right now. Hey, whoever I'm talking to, I need to go and deal with some stuff now. Or, if it's not possible, to put it on a shelf and pick it off the shelf and deal with later. And that's the key bit, because when we know these unconscious patterns, these unconscious beliefs, like for me, anger is one that arrives from danger, that awareness allows us to just see way clearer. It's like clearing the fog. You know, what's in front of you is so much more simple and clear, because you know whether it is attached to something else or not. I'm not saying it's easy and perfect, because, you know, again, we're all human, we all get it wrong. But again, because of the awareness, if I do get it wrong, I'm able to go, actually, I've just, I don't know, let's say, shouted at my hubby and realised, a couple of hours later, it was actually nothing to do with anything he'd said. It reminded me of da-da-da-da-da. Again, I can then, if I haven't been able to spot it in the moment, and you get better at spotting it in the moment, the more work you do on yourself, you get better and better and better at it. But the times when I mess it up and don't, afterwards, I can go away, deal with the thing that comes up afterwards, and go to hubby, actually, sorry, I was being a right what's it earlier, and realise now that wasn't really appropriate. And you can repair it, because again, from a place of knowing yourself and having done that healing work, you're able to also own it in a completely different way, because the shame part doesn't kick in the same way. Like, even historically, before I'd have dealt with the stuff attached, if any awareness had to come in, I'd have also pushed the awareness away, because I'd have felt shame about being angry at hubby when it was nothing to do with him, for example. And so I just would have, not said anything, and that would make everything 10 times worse. Whereas now, that having also worked on the shame part, which is why I say for so many people, this shame, grief, resentment with an underpinning of fear is so common, because there's usually at least one or more of them at play, and they all intermingle and mush around together, that you're able to go, actually, yeah, I was a bit of a cow earlier. Let's go and apologise for that, because you're more connected to your reality of this present day.
That's it. You said a few things, or a couple key things that I was taking away from it. The reaction versus the responsive, right? And what I found was, as a male, I'm very, very responsive. I used to be reactive, and when I realized that reacting was an emotional response, to what was going on, I learned to understand it, and I began to look at things and slow myself down, right? Understanding what my body was doing, and what it was preparing me to do. So I realized that I would go back to the habit of standing my ground and saying, whatever's in front of me, I'm going to destroy, or you're going to destroy me. And I realized there was no fear in it. So that was always my reaction. Now, when I realized that, and I can get into a responsive mode, I can begin to look at things and go, what is this trying to teach me?
Yes.
Instead of what is it trying to take away from me. Now, am I perfect on it? No, I don't always catch it in time, because sometimes I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to do this. Then I realize, maybe I shouldn't have done
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Maybe
you're
I
a
shouldn't
human
have done
too, right?
that. Yeah, I'm a human being. I'm a human being, and that's what I try to explain to people. Like, just like everything, we are human beings in this world, and you are going to make your fair share of mistakes,
Yeah,
right? It's holding yourself accountable for those mistakes that you make, and becoming more aware of them, so you can be better the next time that situation does come around. You also said something right along those lines. If you don't deal with these things, they will come back around on you. They have a strange way of repeating themselves,
hmm,
either in different situations, different scenarios, or with different people. But the lesson is always the same.
yep.
Now, and I often, if I don't catch the message in time, I often sit down and I have to go, did I get the message? Did I get the message? And I beat myself up over that, because sometimes you don't, right? Because it's giving, depending on the situation and how you perceive it, it can be very, very um, triggering and very traumatic, depending on the extreme that the individual goes through. And
Mm.
I have a buddy of mine. He's always talking about narcissism and things like that. Well, I play those things in there as well as people who are addicts, right? And understanding, because I want to understand um, the the mental instruction that comes along with that when people do these things. So I know how to show up in those different spaces without, as you said, without judging people, you know, um, without taking away from their experience. And I begin to put together a timeline with things. So whenever something new comes up, I listen and go, oh, that's when they were at this time. So I can add that in there,
Mm.
right? And then we could begin to build the stepping stones in
Mm.
order to help people begin to regulate. And most of that comes from, well, a lot of it comes from eating well, getting the right nutrition in your body, staying away from processed foods.
Hmm.
Um, but most importantly, surrounding yourself with people who have gone through similar things, and being around people who have gone a little bit further than you, so you can take ooh, excuse me, so you can have the opportunity to be able to learn from these individuals. Um, what are some, now you talked about fertility issues and things like that, and as a male, I have to ask this question:
Mm.
is it possible for things like that to affect the male reproductive system as well? Because as women would carry trauma through their womb and things like that, I think a lot of times men would carry the trauma through their reproductive
Mm.
system as well.
Yeah, so I don't know as much on the stats on it, but what I do know from the fertility journey, doctors would quite regularly say that um, one of the and one of the things that's well known for couples who are struggling to conceive is the stress levels that the couple is under. It plays a massive factor, and it's not just the stress that the woman's feeling; it's the stress that either party is feeling, or both. That you hear so many stories. If you're in the fertility world of of stories that you know couples will go through a particular fertility journey like IVF or something, and they'll try rounds and rounds of it with no luck, and then at the point where they give up effectively because either they physically have to because they're not able to have any more rounds on the medical system or things like that, or because just emotionally they're like, I just can't do this anymore, like because it's such a horrible journey, and something in the I'm just give up, we're just not doing this anymore, and you hear so many stories. That's the point. Then the couples conceive naturally, and you hear so many stories of that happening. And actually, what has changed is the psychology. Now, not that it's good to be in a place of giving up, because that can cause other things in other areas, and it's certainly no guarantee, right? Else that's what we tell people to do. But there are enough studies of it that show when the release and of the stress occurs, all of a sudden the ability to conceive goes up. And I remember actually, so this is a funny anecdote from my own journey. Hope my hubby won't mind me sharing this. We'd in our particular journey, we'd had several rounds of being able to try and conceive our first child with no success whatsoever, and we'd tried everything the doctors say, and absolutely I can remember that time was so incredibly stressful for us both. The weekend we actually then caught and we actually had our first child was the only time where we decided it was kind of going to be a month off situation, because I was going away with friends, he was going away to a festival with friends. We weren't seeing each other. It was like, do you know what? This is just a time to forget all this fertility nonsense, just to be ourselves, to go and enjoy some time with our friends, just to completely relax, find who we are again. And that was the month we caught. And I look back and I don't think that's coincidence. And one of the other things to add on to that as well, because to answer directly, they do know the stress levels in a male does change the quality and the quantity of the sperm available, and so therefore obviously that's going to have an effect on the ability to conceive. I don't know all the stats and ins and outs on it, but I do know that's the case. And there's little support. There's not as much support as there should be for the infertility journey anyway. But what is, for understandable reasons to a large degree, does focus on how the woman's feeling. One of the things I did recently, I wrote a 2-part article, one of my blogs. I actually haven't released the second part yet. I need to do that at some point, perhaps on the back of this. And the first part was, and it was talking about relationships with endometriosis. So the first part was very much from the woman's point of view. So I was writing it, with various stats and bits and bobs from my own experience. And I had this epiphany, let's call it that, to kind of interview my husband. I never quite really understood what you felt through all of this stuff. And I tell you, it was mind-blowing, because I had no idea. I was so wrapped up in the world that I was experiencing that I had no idea what he was going through. And so much of it for him was about seeing me. So whereas for me, the emotions were all tied to the possibility of the baby that we wanted, and this other soul that effectively that wasn't happening. So all of my emotions was attached to this other person that wasn't existing and that was wanted so badly. But for my hubby, his feelings and emotions were attached to me, and how much him seeing how much I was hurting him. And I had no idea at the time that was the case. And again, I could really see the parallel where, you can imagine I'm in a lot of groups with people in fertility issues and that, because of my own journey and also what I do. And again, there's so much out there about infertility being a cause of breakup for clients, for people generally, for couples, that it causes divorces and splits because the stress levels are so high. And it was in interviewing my hubby that I was able to go, I can really see why, because I had no idea. And for him, and this is, I know this kind of fits into the stereotype a bit, so which I tend not to do often, because I don't think they're necessarily helpful. But there is the stereotype of, men want to fix things. And of course, in that scenario, he couldn't fix anything. He was completely powerless. Nothing was he able to do. It became a whole medical thing. And I had the emotions that he couldn't respond to. And it caused huge amounts of stress for him, for sure. And I hear this and see this elsewhere, which is why I then wrote this article off the back of it that I do intend to release at some point, and actually got some help from a relationship expert to help me with their feedback and thoughts in the article as well, because we have to recognize that in any situation where another person is involved, any situation, there are 2 lots of everything, right? So, even in this conversation now, I've got a history, you've got a history. And as much as we will have healed and worked on it and done various things because of the type of work you and I both committed to do, we are bringing a percentage of ourselves to this conversation, right? And that what we're bringing to the conversation is based on who we are, what we've been through and done, all of these things. And so in things like a fertility journey where there is a journey of the couple, but they are having such a separation of what they're going through, how that then affects them individually but also together is massive, absolutely massive. And I know, I recall vividly that, our relationship completely changed because both of us did, and it wasn't just one of us. And there's, I changed, he changed, and who we were as a couple changed massively. And we've, actively looked at that to get it better and to change how that is when we brought in some of the awareness around it. And yeah, I think everything has to be. This is where compassion and communication is just such a key thing, because compassion with each other, with every person that you meet, because you don't know their journey, but also just talking. I'm so passionate about sharing what I do and the journey that I do, because when you hear somebody else that makes sense and has a resonance with, it allows something else to be opened up in you. And I think, for men as well, especially, that is, there's not enough about it out there. There isn't that. There's more happening, which is great. The likes of yourself and that being able to bring these conversations out is so key, and it is causing a tide of change in how things are. And there needs to be more of it. Just communication across everything, right? Because everything involves everybody. A fertility journey is seen so often as a women's challenge, and yet it's the couple. It's everything about both of them, and for sure, everything. We both brought so much to that equation.
Wow. So now, which leads me to my next question. In looking towards the future,
Mm.
do you think that we're headed in the right direction in bringing more awareness to what happens to our bodies and the nervous system and how to regulate it? And if so, what are some of the things that we can add to it in order to bring more awareness to it, so more people can begin to look at themselves, but also find the right support out there for themselves?
And those last couple of words is the key. So I think in lots of ways we are heading in the right direction, but there are also some directions that exist that aren't that helpful and could actually end up worse. And I think the key difference between the two is that word support. Because simply bringing awareness to oneself and what we're feeling on its own in isolation, all that's going to do is fuel more fear, more shame, more guilt, more grief, more resentment, all of these things. It's just going to increase them, not decrease them, because we're going to have awareness of them in a place where we're still not safe. And ultimately, if we're in an environment, whether it's self-created or with other people, where we're not safe to express those things and feel them, then going in and feeling them isn't going to be good, because we're not safe to do so, right? So we either need to bring an ability to be safe and with the support of others, or the support of others allows us to be safe within ourselves. But either way, I think one of the key comes down to that support, and support from someone who understands and knows what it means and how to work with it, right? There are, I think when I think back to all the different practices I've done over the years to try and move and change what has happened for me and the stuff I've been carrying, some have been highly unsuccessful. And where when I look back and think where it hasn't been successful, and I've seen this in stories from clients as well. Gosh, I had a horrific story recently where a client had been asked to dig into all her stuff, and then that was all the person did. So she dug into all of her stuff, all of her trauma, wrote it all down, and that was it. I didn't do anything with it. And I was there when she told me, like, wanting to claw my eyes out with frustration that's what, because I'm like, I didn't do anything with it. So you had to feel all that stuff and then, sorry, bye, dump you with it. Like, it just made my skin crawl, because all of that will teach the ego and the inner child is, yeah, we're not safe. Told you. I knew we weren't. We're just so incredibly unsafe here. The whole world is unsafe. Can't be helped, can't be loved. And all those truths, or what we believe to be truths that we told us when we were younger, become even more so, even louder, even stronger. But if there's the support of somebody able to hold and support through, especially if they've gone through it before or versions of it, it can move things in that different way. So when I think about my own experiences, say, my ego is very, very tricky. My ego is incredibly clever, and I warn this when I have coaches myself, and I do work with coaches continuously, because I know I'm not perfect, and I think the only way I can continue holding space for clients is to continuously work on myself, and that's something I honor and promise myself to do. So I always work with somebody, and there's been coaches I've had in the past, or therapists or whatever I've had in the past. And because my ego is incredibly clever, because it had to learn to spot everything. It had to be so hyper vigilant to safety. I can spot an eye twitch that I can interpret as unsafe a mile away. Like, I could win medals in looking at unsafe situations. And I think people with trauma, we all do this, right? I'm sure.
Yeah.
I can see you laughing, but you know exactly what I mean, right? We get so vigilant to it. It's crazy. And so I have had therapy, coaching, whatever in the past, where my ego has gone, I'm not safe to dig into this. So I used to do, and I can look back and laugh now because I can see it, but I couldn't at the time because this was unconscious. But I would give nuggets of something. So I looked on paper, because I'm also a very good student. I'm a very good student in lots of ways. Like, I like to tick the boxes. That's just who I am. I'm a bit of a perfectionist as well in ways. So the coach or whatever would go away thinking, oh yeah, I really helped her. We hit on something really chunky there, and we worked through it, and and this was all unconscious. I wasn't playing a game. I wasn't doing it consciously. But I can look back now and go, I was, if we talk about feelings and emotions and trauma and stuff as being an onion layer, I'd just give them like the top 2 layers of an onion.
Yeah.
And that's all I'd ever go into, because something in me would spot that's as much as they can handle. Mm-hmm. And so that's all I can give them, because if they can't handle more, I can't go more. And I said, this was not, it's conscious now because I've looked into it and gone, oh, that was really interesting what I did there. And the awareness came about when I was in the opposite situation, when I have had people who have, that there's nothing I wasn't able to go into, where I was able to be supported to a depth that well beyond what even exists. And when you're in the presence and the support and the situation of those kind of people who can hold that level of, hey, whatever it is, you're here and I've got you. All of a sudden, I remember reflecting back, why is it I'm able with this person to go there? And that came up, like, where did that come from? Like, I didn't think that was in me. Right. And I can see now that now doing the same for others, that's why. So I think that's the key thing, that we are heading in the right direction. There's so much more, like I'm starting to see so much on the media now about breath work, somatic work, about healing and about connection, and all these wonderful words that I use as well, and that you will as well. And it is happening, and there's more awareness, which is definitely all good. And it needs to just be more whole. It needs to have needs to be able to hold the whole onion layer, right? Yeah. It's if I was I think that's where having a whole host of tools and a lived experience of something can make such a difference as well, because the different level of support someone can provide is different, and there needs to be more of that. There needs to be more conversations like this had, where you and I are digging into the depths of things that aren't talked about in a lot of places, right? And that's one of the appeals of your type of podcast, is where there's depth and conversation for depth, there's also the space for it for others who hear it.
That makes a lot of sense. Makes definitely a lot of sense. Wow, man, we unpacked a lot right there. We unpacked a lot right there, and and I don't want to go too far because I know you got a busy day, especially being in England. I know your time is, getting later over there, and so we most definitely should do this again as we begin to wrap up this episode of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. First, I want to say, Sam, thank you for jumping on, having this amazing conversation, putting all of this stuff on the table, giving people these little gems and these nuggets that they can use and work on, but their own self. But most importantly, how can people find you?
So I'm on a variety of ways. So I'm on Facebook. So facebook.com/Samantha Halliwell Coaching. I'm on Instagram, Sam_the Endo Coach. I'm on Threads with the same handle, Sam_the Endo Coach. Blue Sky with I can't remember the exact title for that, but if you type in the Endo Coach, it'll come up. And that tends to be what I'm known in most spheres, is the Endo Coach, Samantha Halliwell, the Endo Coach. And also my website, theendocoach.co.uk. People can book in and have conversations there. And one of the big things I do because of this type of work is, booking a call. Let's just have a chat to start off with on something. That's the way forward in all these things, is let's just start with a chat in a place where you're heard and listened to, perhaps for the first time in some cases, and we go from there, really.
Okay. And now my second question would be, and for everybody who's curious, her information is in the YouTube channel, so go there and check her out, and ask more questions. Right? We haven't even scratched the surface on everything that goes along with this. I wanted to leave some so you guys can go ask from the individual who actually does this work. So yeah, go in there and check her out. And while you're there, if you want to, hit the subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time that we drop a new episode. Now, Sam, if you had a superpower, what would it be?
If I had a superpower, what would it be? So I did an exercise in a retreat about this, where it was, it was, what are you the queen of? What are you? So effectively, what your superpower was. And what has come up for me in that in two things. One is like a transformation moment. There's a spark that happens. There's a change that happens in a transformation, and I definitely have seen so many patterns in my life of that. That moment in between things. And the other thing that came about, actually, so where I talked earlier about how, flipping beliefs and how they change, one of the things I discovered in my own journey probably about a year or so ago was that I'm here to bring love where there isn't. And that was from a contrast of where my own upbringing, things that have happened over my life, meant there was a lot of times where I was seeking love and wasn't finding it. And this is perhaps where we can pick up on our conversation next time. There's so much about what we experience. We're here to then be able to provide the opposite for it, because it's only in experiencing the lack of something that you can then experience the fullness of something. And so from that, a big thing that I follow and embody day to day now is bringing love where there isn't. And I think that's probably the best way I think I could answer that question anyway.
I love it. And now, one more thing for you before we wrap this up. If you could leave the audience with something, what would you leave them with?
To not feel you have to be alone. To recognize in all things, no matter what is happening in the now, the past, or the future, there is always an opportunity, always a place somewhere that is open for you. And in finding that, you're able to find yourself in a completely different way. And so be open to it, welcome it in, and seek it out, because alone is a choice we can make, and let's choose differently.
Wow. I love that. With that being said, Sam, again, thank you for being on the show today.
Thank
Really
you for
had
having
an
me.
amazing conversation. Can't wait to do this again. Guys,
Mhm.
please go check her out. And as always, if you guys have made it to all the way to the end and you still here with me and you like these conversations, I'm gonna repeat it. I'm gonna repeat it again. It's right there on the bottom. Subscribe, like, comment, share. Maybe you know somebody who can benefit from the conversations that we have. Please share this along with them. And with that being said, guys, we're going to wrap this one up. This day after the 4th. So I know a lot of people are out there recuperating right now. So, guys, please enjoy your day. Get out there and make some memories with some people. And don't forget to work on yourself on a day-to-day basis, because you matter. And as Sam said, you're not alone. And with that being said, guys, I am Tony Lynch. This is gonna conclude this episode of Brief Let's Talk About a Podcast. You guys already know we do one every day, so we'll be back tomorrow with another guest. Be sure to tune in. And with that being said, guys, have an amazing day. All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Love you.